Riesling can do everything. People need to stop talking about it in a defeatist way and talk about it as the world's great white wine.
You call it a four-octave diva. Are you referring to the stylistic range from bone dry to sweet to all kinds of textural things and weights?
Right? Depending on where it's grown, how it's grown, it can be everything. It can be something dancing and lacy and sparkling. It can be something unctuous and serious that needs 30 years of age. You can even make an orange wine out of it, and you can play with its tannins in various directions. So I'm a big believer. It would definitely be my desert island one.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 201. Why should we change the way we talk about German Riesling? How have Austrian and German wines transformed in recent years? And how can you pair German-speaking wines with food? You'll hear those tips and stories as we continue our chat with Valerie Kathawala, co-founder of the wine magazine TRINK. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you listen to this one. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show with the continuing story of publishing my new wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. The wine writer I admire most is Karen McNeil, author of one of the world's best-selling wine books, The Wine Bible. It's going into its 3rd edition this fall and has sold more than 1 million copies to date. But more than the quality of her writing and career success, I admire the brave public stand that Karen has taken against sexism in the wine industry. Her leadership on this issue is part of my inspiration to write my memoir. So I was extremely nervous about asking Karen if she'd consider reading my memoir, let alone endorsing it if she liked it. Well, turns out she liked it. Here's what she said. Quote, "Courageous. That's the first word that comes to mind when reading Natalie McLean's new memoir, Wine Witch on Fire. McLean is an accomplished wine writer, but this deeply personal book takes us behind the scenes, revealing one woman's journey and extraordinary determination to become herself." End quote. This touches me because it's not just about the writing, but also about the story. Thank you, Karen. I am incredibly grateful. I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Lunch in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/201. This is where I share more stories about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become a beta reader and get a sneak peek at the manuscript. Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Okay, on with the show. And then you have Skinny Pablo. What's that about?
Yeah, Skinny is a fascinating guy. He is a musician. He's originally from Guam and is now based in LA. A super creative guy. He also designs clothing. He's a cook. He's really just endlessly creative. And he readily admits that what fuels his creativity is weed. So he's also a real connoisseur of weed. He's now been introduced to Riesling as well. And now he's bringing Riesling into this mix and really changing. When I interviewed him and saw him perform in New York, I just saw a totally new way of thinking about Riesling, contextualizing Riesling, and making Riesling appealing to another generation. You know, everybody wrings their hands that millennials and younger will all turn away from wine. But I think in the right context, and I do think that in many ways wine needs to be recontextualized for a new generation. I think in the right context, this is the perfect way to introduce Riesling to a new generation, that it's, like energy juice, that it transforms your experience of other media, whether it's music or fashion or smoking pot. There are all these different ways to see it. And so that's not my lived experience, but it was fascinating to have a window into that.
So does he have Riesling up on stage with him while he's singing or performing?
He's actually, I don't even know what you call it he's mixing. So he's not singing, he's not playing an instrument, but he's mixing different tracks, kind of in hip hop style. And he is drinking Riesling while he's doing that, yes.
Oh, wow. I feel so ancient. He's mixing tracks. Okay. What are the young people listening to today?
I know. Me too.
So both Austria and Germany have had their PR challenges, shall we say. Do you have any take now? I mean, it's been quite a while. I don't know if it was the 1980s when Austria had to deal with the antifreeze scandal, which I'm not even sure is the correct way to term it, but maybe you could tell us what that was about and what they've done since, or, did it change the industry in any way?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. Yes, you have it exactly right. This was in the mid 80s and it was an antifreeze scandal. This was a time when wines from Germany and Austria were compensated based on levels of sweetness achieved. And in the 80s, before climate change was having a effect, chasing that ripeness, chasing those sugar levels meant everything. And in some tough vintages, as there were in the 80s, some desperate growers figured out a way to boost the level of sweetness in their wines. And that was adding diethylene glycol, which is a component of some antifreezes. It also causes kidney and brain damage, so you shouldn't ingest it, but they had done it anyway. And, it was just a few. But of course, millions of gallons of wine had to be tossed because there was the threat of taint, and the scandal just ruined the reputation of Austrian wine. So that was obviously a disaster. It happened a little bit in Germany too, but to a much smaller extent. But it was ultimately, I think, kind of a 0-hour start from a clean slate catalyst for Austrian wine to really rethink everything. So suddenly the emphasis was on dry wines. Then people wouldn't be chasing the sweetness. Then there was this real scrutiny to what was happening in vineyards and cellars. And I think that's what's given rise to Austria being really a true leader in organic and biodynamic farming, natural wines and natural wine styles. And I think it's overall become a terrific positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at their signature white grape, Gruner Veltliner. I mean, it's the darling of sommeliers still. I mean, it's so food friendly, but it's bone dry. I mean, it's at least the styles that I know of. But yeah, it's true. Someone used to say, it's a shame to waste a good crisis. You can always get something
Yes.
out of it and rise again.
So true. So true.
Do you think the Blue Nun brand has hurt or helped the German wine industry?
I think it's kind of analogous to the antifreeze situation in Austria. I mean, I think at the time when it was a big seller, it was okay. I shouldn't really equate Blue Nun to something that was fatally toxic, but at the time, it was a great thing for the German wine industry. They had a vast oversupply of overcrop, Müller-Thurgau and other crossings, white crossings, and blend that together and keep the residual sweetness recapitalized. And you've got something that's popular the world over and probably lined the pockets of a few people really, really handsomely. But long term, it was a disaster because it destroyed the reputation for quality German wine, which Germany has always done so well. And everybody loves to talk about how at the turn of the 20th century, German wines were more expensive than top growth Bordeaux. And that is really true. And Blue Nun washed that all away. And it's taken until the last 5 years, I'd say, for German wine to recover from that and to reestablish itself. I think part of it relied on generational change. The customer had to change and no longer have that preconception in mind. And I think also German growers had to get that confidence back that they could make these world-class wines. And both of those things have now happened. And you see it in the prices. I mean, German wine, it's not cheap, sweet by any means anymore. It's anything but. And I think you get some of the greatest quality in the world still at a massive discount to, Burgundy, but of that caliber. And finally, the growers are being paid a bit more of a fair price for what they put into it, but still a significant discount to some of the better known regions.
It's true. And even Blue Nun itself has undergone a massive makeover. I mean, I think it's now purely Riesling. It was mixed grapes before, and they redid a whole lot of things to actually bring up the quality on the brand itself, I believe. So,
oh, that's interesting. I actually wasn't aware of that. I'll look into it.
yeah. Well, I was looking at the label is, again, I'm going to date myself, but she's more like Julie Andrews now. She's slimmed down and she was very frumpy before as a nun. Anyway, they underwent a lot of things in terms of the design, but more importantly, what's in the bottle. So, and while we're talking about Riesling and Germany, now you quote Jancis Robinson's line about, I guess it's Riesling being the most influential wine critic.
Right. So her line that I always think of when people ask her, what does it feel like to be the world's most influential wine critic? She says, yeah, I've been touting the virtues of Riesling for 4 decades, and where has it gotten Riesling? So she's saying, if you tie your fortunes to a grape like Riesling, it's always going to be a struggle. I think you always hear that from people who've been working with Riesling for a very long time, that they feel like it's destined always to be a niche. But I feel differently. I've spent enough time around people who have showed me that all it needs is more confidence. I mean, Riesling can do everything, and people just need to stop talking about it in a defeatist way and talk about it as the world's great white wine. And I think that's what's going to change that attitude, that mentality is going to change the acceptance for it.
Yeah, you call it a 4-octave diva. I guess, are you referring there to the stylistic range from bone dry to sweet to all kinds of textural things and weights
Yes,
and so on?
all of
Yeah,
the above,
okay.
right? I mean, depending on
All of the
where
above.
it's grown, how it's vinified. I mean, it can be everything. It can be Chablis, and it can be something dancing and lacy and sparkling. It can be something unctuous and serious that needs 30 years of age. It really can do it all. And you can even make an orange wine out of it, and you can play with its tannins in various directions. So I'm a big believer. It would definitely be my desert island one.
Hmm. Cool. Well, that's making me thirsty. Do you have a couple of wines to taste there?
I do. I do. And one of
Oh,
them
good.
is, of course, Riesling.
Riesling. I've got Riesling as well, but from Canada.
Oh,
But I would say
excellent.
they're German speaking.
Oh, fun. I can't see. What are the labels?
Okay. I will tell you because the podcast listeners can't see either. The 30 bench small lot Riesling from the Beamsville Bench in Niagara. One is the steel post and the other is the wood post. They do real small lot Rieslings here. And they, along with, as I mentioned, a number of other winemakers here, have connections to German and Austrian winemakers, either who have been the winemaker or family connections. So there's quite a bit of influence from German speaking wines here.
I'd like to explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can connect you with folks here if you're interested in seeing the migratory path of German speaking Rieslings in Canada. So, what wines do you have?
Well, I have Jochen Beuerer's estate level dry Riesling, and
Okay.
Beuerer makes wines in the Remstal in Württemberg, which is southwestern Germany. So not a place that many people associate with wine or Riesling, but I think it's really an up and coming, well, it's not even up and coming. It's been happening for a couple of decades, but people are finally beginning to realize that this cool lateral valley with some wonderful older vines and some very thoughtful, and in this case, biodynamic farming can produce some really extraordinary Rieslings, like with a little bit more weight and a little bit more golden fruit to them than you might find in the Mosel, but with less extraction than, or like dry extract embodied than something from the Rheingau, which is the other probably most famous German Riesling for German Riesling region.
And by dry extract, you mean the concentration of flavors and
Yeah, and the body and that sense of weight on the palate, texture as well.
okay.
So I just find that Beuerer's wines have this crackling energy to them and a little bit of
Oh, I like that.
saltiness that play really well with the golden fruit character and a little bit of herbaceousness. So this is definitely our house wine. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Crackling, what did you say? Crackling.
Crackling energy. Yeah. I mean,
Oh, I love that.
they just
Crackling
have like a
energy. Yeah.
crunchy acidity, crunchy ripe acidity.
Mm,
I wish I could share.
crunchy. Yeah. Wish we could reach across the
Mm-hmm.
internet.
How about yours?
Oh, wow. Oh, so good. It's
Mm.
just a gusher. It's not searing acidity, but it is just making my mouth water so much.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm going to salivate over my keyboard here in a minute. But as you said, like it just that acidity makes these wines so food friendly. And yet I love it. They're packed with flavor like apricot, lime, and so on. But they've got these minuscule alcohol levels, which are
Yes.
just amazing. I love it. 8%.
Oh,
Wow.
8%. Okay, so does that one have a little
Residual sugar.
residual?
Yep.
No, okay.
Exactly. So I'm going to compare the two here. But tell me what you're getting from yours that, I mean, you were already starting to describe it. So
Mm,
but,
yeah.
anything else that's coming through? And we'll link to these in the show notes, the wines that we're tasting, so that folks might be able to try to get them wherever they live.
Oh, that'd be great. This one is pretty widely available. It's Meyer lemon and kumquat and lime zest. So these really bright, definitely acid-driven flavors. But there's also this dried herb herbaceousness on the nose that plays so beautifully with those zesty flavors. It's just perfectly appetizing and mouth-watering, even at this time of day.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the best time of day. We are doing our podcast chat right now at about 11:30 in the morning, but your palate is freshest in the morning. And when folks say like, wow, you get to just, taste wine, it's like, yeah, try 20 Cabernets at 9 a.m. Come back to me. But still,
Exactly.
but our
That's
senses are sharper, more sensitive at this time of
definitely.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I
Oh
could
my
make this a
goodness.
breakfast wine.
Yes. Yeah. Mine could tolerate Fruit Loops, like a little bit of sweetness for sure.
Oh, wow.
Although I'll probably get emails on that one. I'm comparing the two from 30 Bench. The woodlot is deeper, has that what I love, and some people really find this, I don't know, controversial is too strong a word, but to say petrol or, that kind of stuff, I love that smell of it just reminds me of summer on the lake and the outboard motor and the water and the salinity.
And you're getting that?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that from a
Do you,
very sun-drenched site or
yeah.
subregion?
The Beamsville Bench is quite elevated. It's a beautiful small patch of the planet, and it's so good for Riesling. I mean, it's got limestone, and I mean, it's just the winemaker Emma Garner is a rock star, literally, and she just does so well with Riesling. I mean,
Oh, I'm
you
going to
know,
look it up.
30 Bench, Cave Spring. Yeah, there's a number of producers here that are just so good with Riesling.
Excellent.
Ah,
And
going back to the other one. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
is the wood raised wine also with a little residual?
This is wood post. Now, I don't have my glasses on due to vanity, but I
Can
don't
relate.
think this was aged. If anything, it would have been neutral barrels, but I don't think it definitely wasn't the intention to have oak age. It's more reference to the vineyard name, Wood
Okay.
Post
Okay.
Vineyard. Yeah. Do you have one or two wines there?
I have two. The second one is not a Riesling because, not everything in
Okay.
Germany is Riesling. I think actually it's less than a quarter of all grapes planted in Germany are Riesling. So it's
Oh,
really
really?
interesting
I
to
didn't
talk.
know that. I would
Mhm.
have thought it'd be more.
I know
Yeah.
what's there is generally very, very high quality. But yeah, I have this other one which might look familiar to you if you looked at my Instagram
Hmm.
recently. But this is a
There you go.
rosé from biodynamic growers in Rheinhessen, which is another up and coming region. And in Germany, rosé can only be made from red grapes. So this one is from Portugieser and Dornfelder, which are two grapes that were high cropping, high yielding, and kind of fell into disfavor. But of course, with the right kind of farming and attention, they can make something really special. And I think the combination of these two, there's a low acidity, high acidity, yin yang going on, and there's beautiful, bright, popping cranberry flavors. This is just the ultimate summer sipper, and it's in a liter format, liter and screw cap, which I love, but there's nothing simple about it. I think there's a real complexity to it. There's a real kind of scale of flavors and textures that you get as you sip it in the glass, but it's just very compelling to the next sip.
I love this. Popping cranberry and scale of flavors. I'm getting some new adjectives here. I've been tired of my own same old.
I'm that way too.
Because it's so hard sometimes you're describing wine and it seems so repetitive, like, okay, lemon, petrol.
Yes.
But no, I like the way you're bringing some new vocab to it. Very good. And so that rosé, is it light-bodied, would you say, or
very much so? I don't know if you can see the color in the glass.
I can see it. It looks almost cloudy, is it? Yeah.
I think that's just because my glass is frosting a little bit. But yeah, it is unfined and unfiltered. But I think you're getting, it is super, super light. It's like pink lemonade without any of the sugar. Just like,
there's a tasting note they might not want to put on their site. It's like pink lemonade.
Yeah, I don't think that was very articulate. I don't know how to say.
No, but it's relatable. People will understand what you're saying for sure.
Grown up pink lemonade. Yeah, just super tart, super fresh, very light. But, for me, there are these certain signatures to wines that keep me coming back. And so I feel like all my tasting notes when I'm writing about wines I'm really impressed by have this same profile. So it's the herbaceousness, the salinity, the acidity, and usually some combination of all of those. And that's definitely what I'm getting here. And I can see this wine working as well with a Thanksgiving, an American Thanksgiving dinner, as with an afternoon by the pool, because there's just enough stuffing in there to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're dealing with turkey, which can be dry, it's nice to have a juicy, mouth-watering wine.
Yeah.
Now, when you say salinity, I'm just curious, are you tasting like a salty-like flavor, or is it more the acidity is giving the impression of salinity?
Well, excellent question. I mean, I'm not sure that I can pull those two things apart in my mouth. I certainly am getting the impression of a saltiness, but if that's being caused by the acidity, I'm not sure. I've read that sometimes it's the addition of SO2 to the wine that can for that impression. Obviously, there are soil types that are affecting it. Now, neither of these wines saw any sulfur addition, so I don't think that's at play here. I think here it's much more coming from the soils. But I agree. I think that acidity and salinity are two things that reinforce each other. And I think that's often what contributes to that sense of energy in a wine. When you have the acidity and salinity, it's like with a great cocktail, it's like what propels you to keep sipping, because there's this kind of energetic flow.
Right. Like from a squeeze of lime or whatever. It's not all soupy sweet in cocktails as in wine. And then I start tying into minerality too. Minerality, salinity, acidity. I find they're like the trifecta of confusion for me personally. It's like, what is this? But, who knows?
They're so slippery. That's right. I mean, I think that maybe where I might have described the wine as being mineral in the past, I would describe it as energetic now, because I think it's more like a sense of a charge on the palate than something stony or powdered rocks, the kind of thing we might have said 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, because that's what people think. It's okay, so it tastes like a wet stone, like but yeah, no, I like the charge, the energy. I like that. Cool. And what else might you pair this? You mentioned turkey dinner and being by the pool as an aperitif. Again, good range. Any other dishes come to mind for either wine that you've got there?
Well, I think because of the acidity, these could really go with anything from a lobster roll to something very traditional in Germany, like this Riesling from Württemberg. Württemberg is a region that's famous for a dish called Maultaschen, which is basically like German ravioli, but stuffed with any number of meats and herbs, and it's quite rich. But I mean, this would just pick up on whatever herbs were in the meat mix and would cut through the fattiness, and it would just lift and bring everything together. And again, for me, the ultimate compliment is when the two are kind of working in a synergy that makes you just want to keep going, a bite of this, a sip of that. And I think that would definitely be a great combination.
That sounds terrific. Wow. Fortunately, we're getting close to lunch, so you can satisfy those hunger images. This is wonderful. We'll keep sipping here, but I wanted to turn now to just what I call the lightning round, but it's just short answers, whatever comes to mind. But is there anything that you believe about wine, but some people would disagree strongly about that?
I think that many people feel like wine has to be a certain way. You have to appreciate a certain way. Whenever I talk to people, like my neighbors, and they find out that I write about wine, say, well, I don't know anything about wine, or, I wouldn't say what this wine tastes like because I'm not an expert. And I'm not an expert either. I'm just a student also. I'm just learning. And I don't think anyone would really, very few people would consider themselves expert enough to say what other people should be tasting or getting from a wine. I think it's so individual and personal. And I would hope that people would never let that intimidation factor prevent them from just enjoying the wine for what it is and being super open-minded and not to be afraid to love the wines that speak to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any memories of childhood smells, aromas? Could be food, but it could be something else.
Yeah, I've thought about this. And funny enough, my childhood was in New Jersey where we had a lot of humidity and a lot of books. So one of my primary childhood smells is like damp book smell. If you can picture it, when you open a book that hasn't been opened in 10 years and the paper has a certain smell to it, a little bit like musty cardboard, cork taint smell, but
Sure, yeah.
that is, for whatever reason, a defining aroma of childhood.
Oh, wow. One of my most vivid memories of smell in my childhood was my grandfather's National Geographics, and they were out in the sun porch, so they were baked. And, I just opened them. And now if I open a National Geographic, I'm right back there. I love it.
I love that. Does the ink have a very certain smell, or it was more just having been baked in the sun?
Baked, but also the paper was thick and glossy, and
Oh,
it just smelled. I'm right back there. Almost want to pair it with a wine. I don't know.
I love it. That would be a fascinating. Have you ever done that? Tried to pair memories with wine?
I haven't tried memories, but I've tried books and bottles. So, and that's pretty superficial but fun.
Oh,
I
very
think
fun.
you can do both in terms of a light read or a whatever, something with a bitter finish.
Yes, yes.
Needs an Amarone or whatever. Divorce story, I guess. But I've done that before, but not memories. That would be fun to pair different memories. They're so evocative. And I mean, that's right out of Proust and Remembrance of Things Past. That's how his book starts with the Madeleine. Yeah. So why
Absolutely.
not?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a childhood food that you remember that you would now, how would you pair it with wine today?
You know, my childhood food situation was very much that of growing up in the 70s, right? So I would say that food in our house, with all due respect to my mom, who was the cook, it was really like meat and potatoes, what needs to be on the table when my husband comes home from work, that kind of thinking about food. And
Sure.
I did not like that style of eating. However, there was one dish my parents made, which I would never eat now, which was steak tartare. But that is a
Ah,
dominant childhood memory because I liked the kind of volcano like form and the little egg in the top, all the accoutrements that came with it. That was much fancier than anything else we were eating most nights of the week. And what would I pair it with now? You know, I don't even know if Riesling could be up to that job. I think I would go for a
yeah.
rosé or red. But to be honest, like this rosé would be up to the job, right? Because it would have the complexity to stand up to capers and whatever else, salty and pungent flavors that you flavor the tartare with. And I would just hope that it would be a very good quality steak tartare, because I don't think that's what we were eating when I was a kid.
Absolutely. That's terrific. Do you have a favorite wine gadget that you'd recommend?
I do. I hope it's not too cliche to say, but it's actually wine glasses,
Oh, okay.
having a variety of wine glasses. I used to be very skeptical about, pairing certain glasses with certain wines, and I still am generally, but I have invested in a few styles that are quite distinctive. Like this is the Josephinen Hütte glass with this very distinctive shape, and this is Jancis Robinson's white wine glass. And I am shocked by how different the wines are from the two different stems. So I've tried this
Wow.
out, on my father-in-law and my mom, and even people who are not professional about wine, who don't take a serious interest in wine. You can pour them the same wine in these two different glasses, and they will swear it's two different wines. So I think, anybody who's a wine professional will have made this experience, but I think anybody who's newer to wine and really wants to kind of understand wines through different lenses, you don't have to spend $60 a glass to do this. You just need, 2 or 3 different glasses with different shapes inside, a big bowl and a smaller bowl. And then just try whatever you're going to be drinking anyway, pour it into 2 or 3 and see how that changes your perception of the wine. I think it brings a lot to the experience.
Absolutely. I was using Zolto until recently, and I quite love it, but they're very expensive. And so Spiegelau, owned by Riedel, has just come out with kind of a knockoff. I mean, in terms of the shape,
Oh, very pretty.
I'm sure they wouldn't violate any patents. But what I liked about Zolto and what I like about Spiegelau's new line now is they're so light and just, I find it does make a difference and it's not snobbery at all. But the thing about the Spiegelau, and I wish I were on commission, but I'm not, they're a quarter of the price of the Zoltos. So I've kind of just bought a case of them and now I don't cry so much when I break one. So
Yes, that's a great tip.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
So
absolutely
it's good
right.
to stock up on the
Definitely.
glasses.
And weight and
Yeah.
thickness, you're absolutely right. Weight and thickness makes such a difference to your perception of the wine. I think that's also something people don't realize until they get something like that Spiegelau glass in their hand, and then suddenly they're aware of an element of wine perception that they weren't before.
Exactly. Yeah. It almost feels like it's an extension of your hand. It's not this heavy globular thing. And do you have a favorite wine book that you'd like to recommend?
I'm a big fan of Jancis Robinson. I mean, I would have to say if I got into wine writing, it's really because of her. She's the one who, as a mom of 3, not that I've become a master of wine or done a fraction of what she's achieved, but, she also had 3 children, somehow just always made this life absolute professional achievement look almost effortless, even though I think she's probably one of the greatest workaholics out there. But everything she does is insightful, and she's humble, and she's open and curious, and still in her 70s with that mindset. And I admire that so much. So all of her wine books, the Oxford Companion to Wine, Wine Grapes, her memoir books, read them all. And I think they're a wonderful place to start, and they're a wonderful place to come back to at any point in your career.
Great recommendation. Now, I wanted to also, before we wrap up, you've mentioned TRINK magazine, and I kind of skipped over it, but tell us a little bit about that, when you founded it, and where it's available now.
Thank you. My partner, co-editor, co-founder, Paula Sador, and I launched TRINK in October 2020. It was never meant to be a pandemic project because we were already planning it in 2019, but certainly a lot of things happened that changed the way it all went down. But in many ways, it was a real gift to be stuck at home and being able to work on this. So much focus. It's a magazine, digital magazine, the world's first and only English magazine about German speaking wine. So we really just, our why is Germany, Austria, South Tyrol, and Eastern Switzerland. And there is plenty of great writing about these places in German, but there really has been less of it, and certainly not concentrated in one place in English. And because Paul and I are both fluent in German and we have our ear to the ground in the German media, we knew that there was all this great writing, great podcasts, and we knew how exciting the developments were in these regions. And so we really wanted to break that language barrier and share them with a wider audience that we knew had an interest and just didn't have a way of accessing. So we wanted to aggregate those. Then we also knew there were all these expert voices that were writing about these subjects in other publications, but wouldn't it be great to bring them all under one roof? So we have people like David Schildknecht and Simon, bringing Anne Kriebel, bringing their talents to bear in our pages. And it was supposed to be sort of a hobby side hustle, and it turned into a more than full-time for both of us, a job, but a true labor of love, something we love doing. We feel so privileged to be working with growers and writers, that we admire so much. And we've gotten a really great response. I mean, there's a real thirst for this out there in the world.
That's great. Wow. And where can we find TRINK magazine online?
It's at www.trinkmag.com, and you'll find everything there. We also have a pretty active social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, but best thing is just to go to the website and dig into what you see there.
So it's trinkmag.com?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And where else can we find you online? I don't know if you have your own website as well, or if you're mostly on social.
I do have my own website. It's ValerieKathawala.com, and that's a place where you find my collected portfolio of writing and other things that I'm up to most currently. And I am pretty active on Instagram. I think the wine community that thrives there is a great place for exchange and learning. So I try to pay attention to what's happening there, and Twitter as well. So all of those are at ValCat NYC, ValKat NYC.
And we'll definitely link to those too in the show notes so that people can find you in the magazine. Valerie, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all these wonderful stories. I just love listening. I really learned a lot too about German-speaking wines. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure.
All right. Well, I'll say goodbye for now, but we'll have to chat again. Many more things to cover. All right.
Thank
bye.
you. Goodbye.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Valerie. Here are my takeaways. I agree with Valerie that we need to change the way we talk about Riesling. It's so versatile in style, taste, and food pairing potential. It just doesn't deserve to be pigeonholed in outdated stereotypes. 2, I was interested in her insights on how Austrian and German wines have transformed in recent years. And 3, I love her tips on how German-speaking wines, especially with their acidity and salinity that give energy to their taste, also help them pair well with food. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, the full transcript of my conversation with Valerie, links to her magazine and website, and where you'll find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll also find a link to my free ultimate guide to wine and food pairing. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/201. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or would like to be a beta reader of my new memoir at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with Brian Friedman, a contributing editor at Food and Wine magazine who has just published his first book entitled Crushed: How a Changing Climate is Altering the Way We Drink. In the meantime, if you missed episode 104, go back and take a listen. I chat about tasting Zinfandel with Joel Peterson, a wonderful and witty winemaker. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
Baby back ribs are a wonderful match, and there are several wines that go really well with baby back ribs, in part because Zinfandel has this really pretty sweet fruit. The blend you may be talking about is Besieged, which is a traditional California field blend based on what California did pre-Prohibition. Nobody was trying to make varietal wines. They were trying to make wines that tasted good and were particular for that location. They planted grapes together called Zinfandel, of course, Petit Syrah, Carignan, Alicante Bochet, sometimes a little Grenache, sometimes a little Syrah, sometimes a little Mataro or Mourvèdre. But those were the blending grapes of California. And so Besieged is based on that concept.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we discussed. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a zesty Austrian Gruner Veltliner or a versatile German Riesling. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now. at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.